Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
The meeting of April 17th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. And please note that quorum is present with Councillor Beattie and Councillor Francis joining us virtually. First up is approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes?
Madam Chair, the following changes were made to the agenda. Communications, item number 5, correspondence from Joshua Warish respecting making HSR frequent, electric, and free. Item 6, delegation request respecting item 11.2, regulation of cargo e-bikes, report PED 23080, PW 23020 citywide for today's meeting. And the two delegations are James Kemp and Mark A. McNeil from Accessibility Hamilton Alliance. And the addition of number 13, notices of motion, improvements to Gilson Park, 50 Gemini Drive, Mount View Park, 115 San Antonio Drive, Scenic Woods Park, 220 Lavender Drive, and Scenic Parkette, 56 West 31st Street.
Who wants to move and second approving this agenda that's getting oohs and ahs? Councillor Cretch and Councillor Spadafora, thank you both. Any discussion on the agenda amendments as amended? Seeing none, we'll move to electronic vote, please, for your approval. And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any to declare at this point? Either way, disqualifying or non-disqualifying? A lot of interest around the table in the agenda in general. Thank you, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of April 3rd. Could I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor McMeekin, seconded by Councillor Cassar. Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, it's before committee for approval. And that almost, no, we're waiting for a couple more votes. Carries, thank you. On to communication items. For this meeting, we have correspondence 5.1. Could I get a mover and seconder to receive this communication item? Moved by Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Spadafora. Thank you. That's before committee for vote, if there's no dialogue on it. Seeing nobody on the list, please vote to receive. And that carries. Thank you. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve our delegation requests as outlined in item 6 of the agenda? Councillor Spadafora and Councillor Cassar, thank you both. Any discussion? Seeing none, please approve our delegation list electronically. Councillor McMeekin in favor of our delegation approvals. Thank you. And that carries. Thank you. On to Councillor McMeekin's favorite part of the agenda, delegations. Members are reminded that questions of delegations are for clarification purposes only and not for debate. We'll hear all of the delegates and then vote to receive them in total. First up, we have 7.1, Rosemary Lucosios, Ainsleywood Community Association, respecting the waste calendar. It was approved on April 3rd. So first up, we have Rosemary. Are you in the audience? Yay. Come on down. When you get to the microphone, you'll have 5 minutes for your delegation. Wonderful. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Rose Lukosius, and I am the interim chair of the Ainslie Wood Community Association. I have asked to delegate today to enlighten you with the struggles our neighborhood and others located around post-secondary institutions encounter in regards to waste management. Ainslie Wood is located at the extreme west end of the original Lower City before amalgamation. Our boundaries encompass the north side of Main Street west from Coots Drive, west to the Dundas border, continuing to follow Main Street west on the east and west side to the Ancaster border. At this point, it heads back east, running between Highway 403 and Main Street West to the entrance and exit of the 403. McMaster University borders our community. Needless to say, Ainslie Wood is heavily populated with student housing. Every September until the end of April, we have an influx of new and returning students renting homes in our area. What were once single-family dwellings are now home to students ranging in number from 4 to 16 per household. As you can imagine, garbage is an issue in our neighborhood. The vast majority of undergrads arriving in September to their new home do not have the waste collection envelope that is distributed each spring. It has been thrown out by previous tenants leaving in the spring in the haste to go home while packing and cleaning up. New students arrive in the fall and have no idea about the City of Hamilton waste disposal system, including a one-bag limit. Unfortunately, multiple bags of garbage are brought to the curb. Recycling is not sorted correctly and often contains banned items such as styrofoam and black plastic. Although our waste collectors do an admirable job of removing most waste materials, they must follow the rules set out for them. Consequently, we are left with multiple green garbage bags and recycle bins with OOPS stickers affixed to them. Unfortunately, frustration occurs by homeowners and renters alike, as the remaining garbage and recycled materials are either left at the curb, front porch, or side of the house, where more material accumulates, being ripped apart by animals or blown around by wind, littering the neighborhood. At this point, dumping occurs by renters in close proximity to trash cans placed along Main Street West and the rail trail, which runs east and west through the middle of Ainslie Wood. As a matter of fact, one such can was removed altogether by city staff at the pedestrian crossing to McMaster at Sanders Boulevard and Coots Drive, as so much garbage was dumped there on collection day. I have also seen students resort to leaving notes on their trash cans indicating there are multiple units in the house and therefore have more than one can. I have had to educate new neighbors on my street about the one bag limit and often hand out my extra tags. I would like to ask the Public Works Committee to consider the following suggestions to help prevent and alleviate these problems for areas adjacent to McMaster, such as ours, Westdale, and neighborhoods surrounding Mohawk College. Ideally, the mass distribution of the waste management envelopes, which include the booklet, calendar, and garbage tags, be distributed throughout the city in the fall as opposed to the spring. I understand that this would be an expensive endeavor and impossible at this time. However, I have a few ideas that could assist in getting the pertinent information out to renters surrounding post-secondary institutions. One suggestion is to do an abbreviated mailing in the fall, which could include the waste management calendar, garbage, recycling, and green bin pictures, yard waste disposal, along with bylaws surrounding waste management and illegal dumping. This could all be done on an 8.5 by 11-inch double-sided page with extra garbage tags attached. Or the Public Works Department could work with McMaster University and Mohawk College in distributing this information to their students the best way they see fit through social media or welcome packages. Extra garbage tags could be distributed on campus where students could easily access them through their off-campus housing office or student union office. Or a simple magnet in the shape of a garbage truck could display a link to the city's waste management website. Every home has at least one refrigerator, and it is less likely to be misplaced or thrown out when the school year ends. I hope I was able to explain our situation and that you consider some of the suggestions above or come up with a viable solution to our dilemma.
Thank you for your presentation. So it's open for questions. We do have a speakers list started. Councillor Danko's up first.
Actually, no questions for the Delegate. I really appreciate the presentation. Same issues around Mohawk College in Bonington and Buchanan. Do have a question for staff, so maybe we'll receive and then ask that.
Sure, I'm just going to hang on. Is there any other questions for the delegate as the presenter? Okay, we'll come back to you, Councillor Danko. Next up, we have Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Rose, for the really instructive delegation, not only defining the problem, but offering up some constructive solutions, which is very much appreciated. To my colleagues, just a quick comment, and I too will have a question for staff, a few questions, is I can absolutely attest to the situation that Delegate Rose has described for us. And particularly in shared spaces along the rail trail where either the property owner does not wish to incur the cost or inconvenience of multiple bags. And so they use cans along rail trails and in parks as their own method of disposal. So it is not unusual every single day of the week to get multiple bags of garbage, household items, you name it, along a public space. I just want to make sure I'm clear through the chair on the abbreviated proposal, just so that I have it right. You were suggesting, you said an 8 by 11 page along with tags. I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you were defining as abbreviated. Please, through the chair.
Thank you. Over to you, Rosemary, just to confirm.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
That is confirmation. Okay, thank you. And the other suggestion was the magnet, which would have the website on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thank you. In your conversations through the chair, Rose, with students, is it your sense that at the young age of 17 and on, they have never sorted waste before in their life?
Well, the thing is that every municipality has a different way of sorting. And I believe in Toronto, you just throw everything into a bin, and they're coming from all over Ontario. So no one really knows what goes where and what's banned, such as styrofoam and black plastic. So I find that they're, the sorting and even sorting paper and cardboard to the other materials, they don't have a clue. And it's not just in the fall. It goes on and on and on. It's the whole year. All these pictures basically were taken in the last few weeks. And you can still see even the one big green bin is full of yard waste. And this week, I just walked by it again, and it's still full. They've just added to it. Don't understand that you're not supposed to put yard waste in your green bin. So,
Thank you. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rose. Really appreciate your informative delegation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor A. Wilson.
Thank you, and thank you, Rosemary. When I was a student at McMaster, and I was in the Ainslie Wood area, I was on the Ainslie Wood Westdale Community Association, so just right next door. And I know as an MSU rep there and a student union rep there, one of the things that we were actually aligned on between the student union and the neighborhood association was the need to do some of this reform. As you're kind of coming forward, it's been a number of years since I've been involved in those conversations. What is your relationship with the student union and some of the students in the community look like now? Are you asking for the same things at the same time? Are those conversations still kind of initial and forthcoming, or could you speak to that a little bit through the chair?
Thank you.
we used to get together before COVID, and we would have regular meetings, and a member of the Student Union often attended. I'm also on the Packer Committee, which is the President's Advisory Committee. Really haven't discussed that much because at this point there seems to be more important issues. But that's why I was hoping that possibly just myself doesn't have much clout, but if this Public Works Committee or whatever did get involved with the university and try to come up with a solution, that would be more beneficial. And those were my suggestions for that.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I agree with the comment that you're making that we can do some of this. Other cities have tried unique approaches as well. I believe it's Austin, Texas, for example, has worked with charity providers and things like that to do a furniture collection on move in, move out to prevent some of it from going to landfill and kind of better collecting it into kind of those reuse streams.
Right.
Have you looked at any other cities, or when you're making these recommendations, did this kind of come through personal experiences and conversations? Did you look at what other cities are doing? How did these recommendations come forward?
They were just my own ideas. I know at one point, a number of years ago, they used to have a day where you could put out furniture and whatever, and it was sort of like take it if you want and reuse it, and then the next day, they gave you a period of time, and then the next day it would come and be picked up as a bulk idea, which is a great idea because there is a lot, especially in April, the end of April. From now on, you'll find a lot of materials that are just going out because people don't want to cart it home. So that would be another great suggestion, to reuse things. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thanks so much for your delegation and for letting us know kind of how you came to the recommendations. Really appreciate this and really appreciate you bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for our delegate? Seeing none, thank you again for your
Thank
presentation.
you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Before we go to receiving the whole of them, so we'll go to questions per delegation item if there are for staff. So Councillor Danko and then Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And again, you know, the situation that was presented there is very similar to around Mohawk College, the neighborhoods of Buchanan and Bonington, and the situation that was referenced with the single-family home that's been carved up to have 10, 12, 16 adults living in one single home. You end up with a situation where there's no way that they can realistically, you know, have one bag of garbage a week. But in my mind, this is an issue with illegal rentals with the landlords, not with the tenants themselves. They're doing the best that they can. So through you, Chair, my question to staff is, if these houses were legally separated into separate units, would each one of those units have their own, you know, allotment, and also their own set of tags and calendars, et cetera?
Sure. Thank you. Director?
Thanks. Good afternoon. Angela Story, Director of Waste Management. And through the chair, that's correct, Councillor Danko. If a letter carrier, somebody that works for Canada Post, is aware or can identify that there's multiple units on any one property, they would leave that number of packages for that unit.
Thank you.
Councillor?
That's the only question I had, but I think, again, it just highlights the importance of rental licensing and holding landlords responsible for their properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So on behalf of Rose, if I could, through you to Ms. Story, could you comment on the proposal? As you can appreciate, in a student area, we have a mass exodus in at the beginning of April, and those waste tags and that waste information get lost or buried or thrown out or taken home, and are nowhere to be seen in September. Could you just speak to that, please, and thank you?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wilson. So the city, our waste staff and our community outreach team, we actually do work with McMaster. I think it's called the Off-Campus Housing Group. And so we connect with them on a regular basis, or they connect with us. Likely during COVID, their housing fairs or their other fairs that were in person at the school likely were put on hold. So our outreach team, they've confirmed that we did connect with them last fall. So in September, we would provide them not an abbreviated version, which again is a great idea. We would provide them with the full set, the calendar labeled with the tags inside, so that everybody would be able to get that for September. And all they have to say is, you know, somebody moved out and somebody moved in, and we'd be happy to give them to give them those tags. So I think, coming out of COVID, now that we are attending a number of neighborhood association meetings, ward meetings, festivals and fairs, it likely is a great idea for us to circle back with both McMaster and Mohawk to make sure that we have enough information given to them that they can give to their students.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I do know in partnership with the MSU, the last time they delegated, I believe, was during budget day, and they've mentioned it then, and they mentioned it, Rose mentioned PACR, which is the President's Advisory Committee. It's a neighborhood / university / student / Ward 1 table, which seeks to identify the relationship between McMaster as an institution and the impact on the neighborhood, et cetera. They mentioned an interest in hosting an education table and a distribution table on campus. And of course, your shop said, absolutely, we would love to do that. But specific to Delegate Rose's questions about a mail out or a drop in September, would that at all be possible in the Ainslie Wood?
Yeah, so through the chair, we will need just to take that back from a budget perspective, Councillor Wilson, and see what that would look like. Happy to work with you offline if you want to do that.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. I really like the idea about the charity initiative raised by my colleague. I do know that the move out day does see a lot of furniture and there's toing and froing. My first term of council, to my colleagues, I did do a waste shift in the Ainslie Wood neighborhood, and I can tell you that a lot of times what the waste collectors are faced with is coming to an address and they are well over the bag limit, but they're faced with the dilemma that if they don't take the additional bags, they absolutely know that bag is going to be ripped open and there a week later. So they have to use their best judgment, and often they are looking for frequent flyers, but it's an ongoing struggle. So I really appreciate the delegation. I appreciate the underscoring the need to work in partnership with property owners and the student union and the university. And I will certainly work with Angela, beg your pardon, moving forward on seeing perhaps some different way in which we can distribute that won't be a financial burden, but it may be locations for pickup and drop off of waste, or it may be working in partnership with the existing neighborhoods there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the responses as well. On to Delegation 7.2, which are respecting how the City of Hamilton can make the Hamilton Street Railway frequent, electric, and free. There is a bundle of delegations underneath. Oh, my apologies. Hang tight for that delegation. We had one more.
I'll follow up offline.
You're going to follow up offline? Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So back to our previously scheduled programming of our delegations on HSR. So first up, we have Edward Rice. I just wanted to confirm, Edward, Jason Hindle, Christine McNabb, and Teresa Cardy. Is this a joint delegation, or is each receiving 5 minutes? Each is receiving 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, first up, we have Edward Rice from the Council of Canadians Hamilton chapter. Edward, if you could unmute yourself, say good afternoon, and then confirm I can hear you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me at this
I
point?
can hear you loud and clear. Please proceed. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you. Madam Chair and members of the Public Works Committee, my name is Edward Reese, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to this meeting of the committee. On behalf of myself and the Council of Canadians Hamilton Burlington chapter, of which I am a member, I am here today to ask that you consider the establishment of a committee of council to examine how the City of Hamilton can make the Hamilton Street Railway frequent, electric, and free. Our chapter, along with our allies in Hamilton 350, mounted a public campaign during the last municipal election to make public transit in Hamilton frequent, electric, and free. 30 candidates for office pledged to support our call for the formation of such a committee, among them Councillors Kretsch, Huang, Clark, Kassar, and Wilson, along with Mayor Horvath. And we thank you for your support. Frequent and free public transit using electric buses is an idea whose time has come. As cities like Hamilton declare climate emergencies and cast about for big ideas to combat inequality and reduce carbon emissions, free public transit can be a big part of the solution to many of the problems facing Hamilton and its citizens. It would solve the problem of decreased ridership that the HSR, like many other municipal transit systems, is facing post-COVID. It would reduce the number of cars on our roads and help Hamilton to meet its climate goals. It would make life fairer and more affordable for Hamilton residents, especially those with the lowest incomes. It would sharply reduce inequality and improve the local economy. Simply put, transportation is a basic need and not a luxury. Mobility is important for the financial viability of families, communities, and cities. Making transit free and reliable removes a major barrier to accessing healthcare, groceries, shopping, green space, and employment for many of our most vulnerable citizens. Now, according to the New York Times, over 100 cities around the world have free or near free public transit. Kansas City, Missouri became the first large American city to offer zero-fare citywide transit in 2019. Now, 2.5 years later, anyone living anywhere in the city can ride buses without paying a fare. 90% of riders surveyed say they ride the buses more often. 92% say zero fare allowed them to shop for food more often. 88% said they could see their healthcare providers more easily. 82% said it allowed them to get or keep a job. And 86% said it made them feel like city leadership is concerned about their needs. Besides the increased mobility and financial benefits, nearly 80% of the residents surveyed also said zero fare increased their sense of safety on the bus. And that points to one of the more counterintuitive benefits of eliminating fares, which is that the buses became safer to ride. Kansas City statistics show that actual incidents where supervisors have to be called upon to quell a disturbance on a bus have actually gone down, because of course many of those incidents concern passengers who either could not afford to or who refused to pay the fares. Boston, Massachusetts started a 2-year pilot project to make some routes in that city free in January of 2022, and making even more routes free is currently under consideration. Among the benefits listed by that city are increased ridership, faster buses, less traffic, and business development along the routes that are free to ride. So these are just 2 examples of cities in the United States that have introduced free transit measures. Here in Ontario, the city of Ottawa has been examining making transit free, while Orangeville began a 2-year pilot project making local transit fare-free in January of this year. Here, of course, in Hamilton, the HSR has just made transit for kids 12 and under free. And congratulations to Council and the HSR for making such a far-sighted decision. To sum up, thank you for considering our proposal to establish a committee of council to examine how the city can make the Hamilton Street Railway frequent, electric, and free. We would be honored to have representation on such a committee and look forward to working together on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. The speakers list is activated. Any questions for this delegate? Seeing none, we'll move on to, thank you again, Mr. Rees, for coming in to delegate today. Next up is Jason Hindle from Hamilton 350.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you loud and clear. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Excellent. Starting my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Not at this time.
Oh, let me just check on that.
We can see your screen. Yep, we're just, yep, we can see it now.
Good stuff. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Public Works Committee. My name is Jason Hindle. I'm with Hamilton 350. As Ed mentioned, this is a collaboration between the Council of Canadians Hamilton chapter and our group. We've been active with this campaign since roughly this time last year when we began surveying folks at the various transit stops throughout Hamilton on the concept of frequent, electric, and free. We got a lot of great feedback from various folks on why this could help improve their lives in a lot of great ways. We did get, as Ed mentioned, the eventual mayor of Hamilton, as well as the 5 councillors listed below, agreed to pledge to assist us in forming a committee of council. We're obviously here today to try to expand the support for that ask. I'm specifically going to be addressing electric buses as part of that ask. So I'm going to start with a question, I guess a provocative question. Why is Hamilton lagging our peer cities? And I'm going to share with you a graph or a chart that I've put together. This is data that's publicly available. It was largely gleaned from the Transit Authority public websites. And what I've done is I've taken that data and I've normalized it. So I'm showing the EV bus planned deployments of those cities versus Hamilton as a percent of fleet. So this way, different size cities, it normalizes it and you can compare apples to apples. So this is the chart. And just to give you kind of the landscape of what this is showing, the blue bars are percent of EV fleet planned deployments by 2026, so 3 years from now. The orange bar, the orange section of the bars are percent of EV fleet, additional EV fleet converted by 2029. So if you go right to the bottom, you see Brampton is, you can add the numbers together, it's 100% planned deployment within the next 6 years. Their entire fleet will be converted to electric buses. You look at Oakville above that, they're roughly in the same category. They have not yet published beyond 2026. So they, in fact, could be even more aggressive than Brampton. So kudos to Oakville. You look at Guelph, Toronto, Mississauga, Ottawa, roughly all in the range of 50% of their fleet approximately by 2029 converted to electric buses. There's another pack, London, Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge, and Burlington, all planning to get started in the next 3 years. They've at least got some vehicles on order or planning to buy. And Hamilton, to our knowledge, and correct us if we're wrong, we don't see any plans for any procurement or buses that have in fact been procured. So we really seem to stand out. These are our sister cities around Hamilton, or around Hamilton. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point first. Second aspect is, so you get pushback as to why EV buses can't work or it's not the right time for it. One is that they're too expensive. This, in fact, is not true. The city of Brampton, who I highlighted at the bottom of the last chart, in April of last year, they cut a deal with the Infrastructure Bank of Canada to get a loan through the Zero Emissions Buses Initiative to procure their 450 electric buses over the next 5 years. And this essentially covers the price difference between an average $1.3 million EV bus and an average $700,000 combustion bus. It also is paying for the charging infrastructure. The loans are paid off with lower maintenance and fuel costs. So when they're taking advantage of these federal programs, in fact, this is an economic improvement for the city and not just an emissions reduction initiative. City of Ottawa, in the same vein, in fact, more ambitious and aggressive than Brampton from a funding perspective, they secured a $350 million grant from the Infrastructure Canada Zero Emissions Transit Fund. So this is a separate funding mechanism than the one highlighted above. Although last August, they also received a loan of $380 million from that same Canada Infrastructure Bank. So they are in fact getting upwards of $700 million to support their transition to electric vehicles over the next few years. The second pushback you hear quite often is there's not enough space in our depots for the charging infrastructure. So that's a bit of a holdup. That's no longer true. So right now today, there are 10-minute full charge roadside charging stations, these 450 kilowatt stations that are available today. They're deployed across Europe, North America. 2 or 3 of the cities I highlighted have these on order as we speak. So these are inline, en route bus transportation charging. You get the full bus charge in 10 minutes. So there's not the same hold up of having these charged overnight at the depots. The last pushback you hear that I'm going to mention is Canadian winters are too cold for EV buses, and that's not true as well. So I think we can all agree Ottawa is generally colder than Hamilton. When they ran their pilot a couple of years ago, so this is some quotes from Rene Amilcar, who's the general manager of their transit authority, OC Transpo. What he found was during the winter months, the results of the EV buses were very good. The battery is fairly autonomous and it performed much better than expected. Just highlighting again the funding options that have been taken advantage of by other cities in Ontario. The Canadian Infrastructure Bank loans, there was $3 billion roughly set aside for zero emission buses that other municipalities are taking advantage of. There's the Infrastructure Canada grants program, $1.5 billion. These are both, towards buses and public transit. And then there's QTRIC, which I know the HSR is a member of. They will work with your city to plan out, strategic vision right through to deployment. And right now they're working with City of Burlington, City of London on a joint EV bus procurement program. Just quickly, why electric buses? It's not clear. There was a recent report from Clean Air Hamilton. Their latest report, air quality is getting worse, especially in the downtown core. Bruce Newbold, who's their chair, said electrifying city fleets should have a huge impact on air quality through the downtown core by removing cars from our streets. The latest IPCC report on climate change says if we have any hope for trying to avoid the worst of climate change and keeping it to 1.5 to 2 degrees, we need emissions reductions this decade, not 2035, not 2040.
I'm going to pause you there, Jason. You've exceeded the 5-minute warning, and I'm sorry I didn't give you a 1-minute warning because I didn't hear the bell myself. So do you have many more slides?
One slide left.
One slide, okay, go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, this is just, we're not bending the curve yet on emissions. This is where emissions are going. They're at 420 parts per million today, still on upward trajectory. We need to attack emissions today. Finally, what is our ask? As Ed mentioned, it's to form a committee of council to study how could we go more frequent, meaning 15 minutes, and go electric. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You do have a speakers list. First up is Councillor Crouch.
There we go. Thank you so much, and ask if you take the presentation down just so I can see the delegate.
Yep.
Thanks so much for your presentation. Obviously, I'm supportive of this move. What I want to ask you is 2 questions, one about extractive resource consumption, and secondly about the escarpment. I'll start with the escarpment. So, objection 625 is, oh no, Hamilton has an escarpment. Could you speak to that?
So what's the issue with the escarpment? So if I can clarify.
Yes.
Electric buses have to go up the escarpment. Oh no. They can't do them as well as combustion engines can get up the escarpment. Oh no. That's the best. I'm not a scientist, so that's all I've got.
Sure. No, I see what you mean. So it's really the extra draw on the batteries that you're speaking to when it comes to, going up elevations. To some degree, the answer is when you come down, you're actually going to be feeding back into the batteries. So you do pay a price going up the escarpment, you gain it back as you descend the escarpment. So in theory, there is a net zero kind of impact from that aspect. But yeah, I'm not the expert either, but that's something I can think of right away to counter that objection, if you will.
Thanks. Again, supportive. This question is more so just to understand maybe how much thought is out there in terms of the discussion, and great work for the committee to do, but we get benefit perhaps in terms of our local air quality, but the extractive resource industry that mines the information, mines the resources for the batteries doesn't. And as we think about ethical consumption and globalization, just wondering if you've got a thought about the advancement of battery technology, our need to replace less of them over time, what these extra 450 watt stations are doing to help us increase battery, that kind of stuff. Like wondering to what extent that's been part of your thinking.
Right. And to your initial point, it's certainly that would be an aspect that should be part of the overall committee's objective, to look at these peripheral kind of impacts that may be negative or positive. But yeah, in the case of our extractive economy and specific around batteries and lithium, certainly it's a major issue to consider. We've got that more locally here in Ontario, right, with the Ring of Fire that there's a lot of buzz and talk about. Certainly the key thing is to have the mining done sustainably, to have, proper control of the tailing ponds and the processes. I think somewhat the industry has a bad reputation. And so some of that is just being better environmental stewards as they're working their processes. But I would also add that the battery technology itself, it's going to change over time. There's a lot of moves to replace lithium with cheaper and more accessible and less problematic resources like sodium, for example. And I think you're going to see that, in fact, in the next few years as batteries kind of evolve and change and take on different components and technologies.
Thanks so much. Those are my questions. Appreciate your delegation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor A. Wilson, followed by Councillor Kassar.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, just to, again, supportive, you know that, Jason, but just trying to move this forward and actually get to implementation. And so some questions about terms of reference and scoping. Could you just speak, what is the value of having a committee as opposed to asking for an information report? Why is this the right structure to have this conversation in our community?
Sure. No, great question. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. If I look at the OCCI that was just formed, and I paid close attention to the way it's being formed and governed. What I'm really impressed with is the community advisory aspect of it and the feedback from various stakeholders in the community. And to my mind, it's like really that should be the model going forward for anything that really impacts so many of our citizens, as air quality does, as the climate does. So I think getting impact from different, voices in the community, whether it's academic, business, just regular folks in the street, they really should be comprised in that committee, as well as obviously city staff and councillors. So I think a broad cross-section would make, just sense in evaluating this and moving it forward.
Thank you. And through the chair, heard a lot of pieces there, importance of community members, importance of council, importance of staff expertise, importance of also framing and centering justice in those conversations as well.
Yes.
To those ends, do you have thoughts on terms of reference, committee size, making recommendations as to are there specific groups or types of expertise that would be needed or required? So for example, we have a Hamilton Transit Riders Union. I know Council of Canadians and 350 have launched this idea. Can you speak a little bit to ideal membership or terms of reference from some of the folks proposing this committee?
Sure. Yeah, not in exact details at this point. That's certainly something to be explored, in detail, but definitely, the Transit Riders Union, they've been longtime advocates for these measures. They've got a lot of great ideas and experience and lived experience that they can draw from. I would add, it's you're not reinventing the wheel here in Hamilton on any front, right? And so if we look to other cities that have had success, Ed mentioned Boston, Kansas City, Orangeville, and what they're doing now in other cities in Canada, really drawing, if we can, from other communities and what their experiences have been positive and negative as well would be a key aspect to that mission.
Thank you. And last question from me is, do you see some form of relationship as a committee that reports directly to council is a value, or is maybe embedding this in the OCCI, the Office of Climate Change Initiatives work, and forthcoming citizen committee as like a subgroup? Where you're thinking about that in terms of where this gets housed? Neutral, haven't thought about it. Do you have clear preferences or thoughts on what would be most effective?
To be honest, really haven't thought enough about that to understand where it could fit. I mean, obviously candidates would be this committee, would be the overall council, could be in conjunction with the OCCI for sure. It's a major emissions reduction initiative with transportation. But yeah, I think it needs more thought, or at least for me it does, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Cassar.
Hi, Jason. Thank you very much for the very informative presentation. I learned several things from that, as I'm sure we all did. Really well done. I wanted to focus a question just around implementation, because I think there's two pieces here. There's the conceptual, getting buy-in that it's the right thing to do, and I know that there are many of us here in this room that believe that. And then there's the selling the implementation of it, and you touched on some things like quick charging and the temperature, and Ottawa is not having problems there. Is there anything further that you can speak to from your research on any successes from implementation or any challenges and how they were overcome, as to kind of share early advice with this council here?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Councillor Cassar. So a few things stand out. One, for top of mind, and it was the Kansas City story. It was really interesting. If, in getting on board the transit bus drivers to this initiative, one of the things they found in Kansas City was a pretty dramatic drop in violent encounters for those employees, for those bus drivers, specifically around having to collect funds from people who didn't have enough money or didn't want to pay, and they were forced to be kind of the cop, if you will, on the bus. That was taking away from them. And so they had dramatic, and there's data that supports it, they have dramatic drop in violent encounters, and made the the work of those bus drivers is much more enjoyable and less stressful. So that's one thing that surprised me and stood out in that Kansas City situation. Another aspect is for Boston, and this is along the lines of the just aspect of it. They're really focused first and foremost on routes that are in the more economically disadvantaged parts of that community. And maybe it's Boston's esprit de corps or what have you, but that really seemed to rally the community around the support for this. You know, we're taking care of the tougher neighborhoods for getting transit and the need for transit first and foremost, and then getting into the more well-to-do neighborhoods. So those are two tactics that seem to be, or aspects that seem to be really interesting and could help support and buffer this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason. That's all.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sure.
Okay, thank you, Jason. That exhausts the speakers list, and thank you again for delegating this afternoon.
Thank you to
Next up,
everyone.
we have Christine McNabb, also from Council of Canadian Hamilton chapter. Christine?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 5 minutes.
Great. I'm just going to cut through some of the stuff. Jason addressed it with some of the questions from councillors. So I'm just going to skip over the first part of my presentation and just get right to the actual committee, formation of the committee. So I am Christy. I'm also with the Council of Canadians and have been working with both Ed and Jason and several other folks from both of those organizations on this, this effort. As Ed mentioned, 5 councillors and the mayor did sign our pledge during the election campaign to form a committee of council examining making the HSR frequent, electric, and fare free. While I believe that frequent, electric, and fare-free public transit is one of the most direct ways that we can begin to address the crises that our city is facing, including you know, within that context of the pandemic recovery, inflation, and affordability, and also climate collapse. I do think that this is one of the most direct ways that we can begin to address these crises, but I do not expect that implementing it would be uncomplicated or easy. First, the sheer number and diversity of stakeholders most affected by the efficacy, affordability, accessibility, emission rate, and cost of public transit is extensive. Seniors, people with mobility issues and/or disabilities, low-income households and the unhoused, people with environmental health issues, and of course, operators should all have a seat at the table if we want any policy concerning public transit to, as the city mission states, provide high-quality, cost-conscious public services that contribute to a healthy, safe, and prosperous community in a sustainable manner. A committee of council that includes elected council members, city staff, and these stakeholders will help keep all aspects of this mission in focus. Having community stakeholders present, I hope, would also provide needed support to councillors and staff when they act on one of the council's 5 cultural pillars: courageous change, embracing innovation, creativity, and risk-taking. And this community engagement and support could prove invaluable when addressing the most obvious barrier: cost. One of my peers' presentations, Jason, who just spoke, touches on the economic feasibility of introducing electric buses to the HSR's current fleet. Moving towards a fare-free and reliable transit system is also possible, but does require strong will, dedication, and reprioritizing transit spending to reflect its role in the community as an essential service and not as a consumer good. A committee of council might explore increasing parking fees across the city, allocating funds from traffic violations, and eliminating the area rating system. Revenue for fare-free transit could be generated through advertising on HSR buses and shelters. You can increase ridership very cost-effectively by providing fare-free rides to those people who aren't using it at all right now due to financial barriers. The committee, when formed, would have data from around the world to study, including Orangeville, where by utilizing gas tax funds, has had an entirely fare-free pilot in effect for the last 3.5 months. And of course, Ed talked a little bit about the Kansas City case study. Of course, developer fees would be a nice source of revenue, but for Bill 23, the province's vilification of municipalities and their desire to offload supporting infrastructure costs onto the municipal taxpayer. So your jobs as elected officials and as our city staff is hard, and it's only getting harder. Making tough choices, including possible property tax hikes, will require the support of our diverse communities. Fighting to keep the city's vision to be the best place to raise a child, to be a place where the community is actively engaged in making Hamilton a better place for everyone, will absolutely require our bodies, the citizens, to stand up against ever-escalating provincial authoritarianism. Ensuring that community stakeholders are an integral part of the decision-making process, especially when the policy is as bold and potentially as culture-shiftingly amazing as fare-free public transit would be, giving those community stakeholders a voice, engaging us collectively in democratic governance on a standing committee of Council for Public Transit will not only improve policy, but it will provide you with a multitude of Hamiltonians ready to endorse tough decisions and to defend Hamilton's right to make policy that protects, supports, and uplifts all of our community members and their future. I thank you so much for your time. And for considering the formation of a committee of council to study frequent, electric, and fare-free public transit.
Thank you for your delegation, Christine. No speakers on the speakers list. Oh, my apologies. Hold on. Councillor Jackson, up first.
Thanks, Chair Nan. Thank you, Christine, for all your valuable information. I'm sure you're familiar with the Hamilton situation, but just in case you may not be, forgive me, through you, Chair Nan, 6 of my colleagues on council here represent suburban areas with area-rated transit, which means that if they're going to get more transit, their constituents will have to pay much more for it. Are you for eliminating area rating? Through you, Chair Nan, please.
Over to you, Christine. Are you for eliminating area transit?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Kassar, followed by Councillor Danko.
Thank you very much, Christy. I wonder if you are able to speak to, well, you did speak to the complexity, acknowledging that it's a challenging vision to have and to implement. Through examples that around the world where this has been done, are you able to comment on how long it has taken some of them to get from a point of making a decision to actually implementing, just to kind of set some expectations or what we might be up against?
Not quite. Frankly, Jason is the one that has a steel trap for a head, and I am the one that has a sieve where information just flies out unless it's in front of me. However, I can say that one of the things that in the beginning of my presentation that I just kind of skipped over was that we are one of the organizations that endorses the Care Fair campaign from HDLC, and we recognize that a stepped process is the most likely process to get us where we need to be, and that would certainly take time, years potentially. I mean, if the question is in terms of expectation, I think that my expectation and the expectation of the people that I've been working with is that that a stepped process is the most likely way to get this done, and that would take more than a couple of years, probably.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Through the chair. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Kretsch.
Thanks, and thanks for your presentation. Good to see you. My question for you falls a little bit in line from Councillor Jackson's question in terms of aerating for transit. Do you see any of these things as necessarily dependent upon area rating for transit, like free, electric, frequent? Anyway, I'll leave it to you to answer that.
No, not necessarily. I mean, like when it comes to the actual finances of this, I'm not going to know. I'm not going to know, frankly, how things work, or I don't even know how much money area rating gets, like in terms of neighborhoods that are going into. But I do know that the riders union is opposed to it. So that's all I can say to that, which is why I sort of have it on my list of like potential things that the committee could look at. Like I don't really know. I just know that there are certainly some arguments out there that suggest that area rating as it stands now. And I mean, it had its use and now it's done. That's what I understand for that. What was the rest of your question? I'm sorry, Cameron.
That was my first question, and thanks so much for answering. I really appreciate just getting your thoughts on that, because I didn't see the relationship immediately myself either, so I'm glad to hear you didn't see it immediately either. So my second point, or second line of questioning, was around the formation of a kind of committee. I just wanted to ask you that question and follow up to what Councillor Wilson had asked the previous delegate, to get a sense. Like, there's just various kinds of committees, right? Like, there's task forces which have a limited time frame, right? They bring all kinds of people in from the community. They have members of council on them, but they're like, we're here for a job. We're going to get the job done. When the job's done, we go away. And then there's subcommittees that carry on and staff does the work, whereas task force, kind of the task force members do the work, right? Then of course there's like a working group or subcommittee offshoot of the climate change committee. Do you have any preference in mind and model for any of this, or are you kind of just open to finding a way to have the discussion happen, and however bureaucratically we decide to do it is of no consequence to you?
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Absolutely. I actually do have a preference. I would like this to evolve. Ideally, it would evolve out of because it's how do I put this? Because it's this is would be a step-by-step process, because you have organizations also asking for having specific requests in terms of HDLC for transit, and so many people have different ideas about the best way to approach this transit. And because it's an evolving issue, this isn't something I see as a one-stop. Okay, we got our public transit and now. Or free, and now we're on our way, or we have electric buses and now we're on our way. As far as I think that what I see is a long-term committee that is solely dedicated to public transit, to ensuring that there's that people have mobility in the city. And I do, however, think that if that committee was attached to the OCCI, that makes the most sense to me, I think, just because I tend to think that most city issues now should be attached to the OCCI. So because it's such a obviously overarching issue that all of us need to be facing, and every decision that the city is making, I think, should be connected to that, to climate change issues.
Thank you, Councillor.
Did that answer it?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Lovely answer. Thanks for your time. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
And that exhausts our speakers list. Thank you again, Christine, for joining us this afternoon. Next up, we have Teresa Cardy from Hamilton 350 and Council of Canadians. Doesn't appear to be present. Not in the chambers and not online. Okay. So again, Teresa Cardy's not here. Nope. Okay, and not online. Okay, so we'll move on to 7.3, delegation request respecting item 11.2, regulation of cargo e-bikes related to PED Report 23080, PW Report 23020, citywide. And first up, we have James Kemp, and followed by Mark McNeil. So James, I see you clearly. Mind saying good afternoon so I can hear you?
Hello.
Hi, hear you loud and clear. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and members of the Public Works Committee. Thank you for taking the time to hear from me today regarding report PED 23080/PW 23020 and the regulation of e-cargo bikes within the City of Hamilton. There can be no question that e-cargo bikes and their commercial variants have potential value to a municipality, and I won't argue against that. What we have an issue with is the complete lack of safety features required on these large, nearly silent, fast-moving vehicles. We have an issue with allowing commercial cargo vehicles into the multi-use pathways, or as we call them, bike lanes. We also have an issue with them being parked in the furniture zones, as they've already cluttered the bike racks, e-scooters, garbage cans, recycling bins, benches, and so on. To begin, I would like to recognize the differences between e-cargo bikes and e-cargo commercial bikes. We've already seen private ownership of cargo bikes and e-cargo bikes. In my experience, they are usually responsible and considerate operators. They abide by the rules, use their bells regularly, calmly pass people in slower moving vehicles, and park their vehicles well, ensuring free passage by pedestrians of all needs. However, they could be made safer by requiring acoustic alerting devices and small strobe or flashing light on the front of the vehicles. This would alert people with vision or hearing loss, as well as people with mobility issues of their presence independently of the operator. It should also be noted that as the costs for these vehicles come down, we will see more operators and should codify strict rules now. So far, the predominant users of these vehicles are families transporting groceries and small children. Now to discuss the commercial vehicles. They may be a great way of reducing the carbon footprint and easing truck traffic in congested areas, but they are not bikes and should not be treated as such. They are more like pedal-assisted compact cars in that they could easily weigh as much as one. We implore you to require an acoustic alerting device that sounds whenever the vehicle is in motion, as well as a strobe or flashing light to catch the eye of the hearing impaired. You cannot rely on the operator to know when they should be sounding their horn or bell. I've had plenty of e-scooters silently rock past me at high speeds, and only one of them sounded their horns. There is also great concern with allowing them to use the multi-use pathways. We've also suggested high contrast colors on the lower half of the vehicle if it is to be parked in the furniture zone. Multi-use pathways are used not only by bicycles, but other slow-moving devices like rollerblades, kick scooters, skateboards, hoverboards, monowheels, and even joggers. They're also vitally important to those that use mobility devices like mobility scooters, power chairs, wheelchairs, and walkers. Sidewalkers are often hard for us to use because of their design, and bike lanes have been a great improvement for our mobility. Now you're suggesting giving companies like Purolator and FedEx access to these same lanes traveling at speeds of over 30 kilometers an hour. To put that in perspective, my power chair moves at 6 kilometers per hour. I want to highlight a passage of the Highway Traffic Act that absolutely terrifies me. Section 9, paragraph 9 states, the brakes of a cargo power-assisted bicycle must be capable of bringing the bicycle while being operated at a speed of 30 kilometers per hour on a clean paved surface to a full stop within 9 meters of the point at which the brakes are applied. So to put that in perspective, if a pedestrian steps into the road within 30 feet of a vehicle, they will be hit, and there will be nothing the operator can do in time to prevent it. You may ask yourself, how likely is it that somebody would step in front of an e-cargo commercial vehicle? And I remind you that they make very little sound to alert people of their presence, and this is a highly likely scenario with an additional safety feature requirements. The last concern we have is that they be parked on the sidewalks and furniture zones. If not parked correctly, their overly large vehicles can impede pedestrian traffic. They should be using parking spaces like other vehicles. There should be an education campaign for private owners to understand some of the rules and requirements to ensure safety for everyone. For example, when they come upon slower moving vehicles and pedestrians, they are to reduce speed accordingly until they can safely pass and then speed up again, as well as appropriate parking procedures and required safety equipment. If you're providing special permits for operations in parks, the city needs to post signs stating that all e-scooters, e-bikes, and e-cargo bikes are not allowed to operate in the park without a special permit. There's currently no signage in any park, and private e-scooter, e-bike owners are silently zipping through the pass with little regard for pedestrian traffic. We are not opposed to the idea of e-cargo bikes, and especially commercial e-cargo bikes, but I entreat you to please take a step back and ensure all safety concerns have been heard and addressed before council ratifies this bylaw. We've heard a pledge to improve accessibility for all in the city of Hamilton. I ask you to consider these very reasonable suggestions in order to be inclusive for all. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Kemp. Speakers list is activated. Seeing no questions at this. Oh, yes, we do. Councillor Jackson, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Nan. James, always good seeing you delegating. I listened carefully. So is your request at the end of your delegation that you would prefer this committee provide some more time for further consultation? Because staff are recommending that we move ahead on allowing the cargo e-bikes. Through you, Chair Nan, please.
James?
Through you, Chairperson, to Councillor Jackson. Yes, I can't speak for the committee. I'm speaking today as an individual, but there are a number of things that we've asked for, and they're very simple, and we would like some more time to consult with staff to at least see if some of these are possible in a short term. We just need a little more time, I think.
Thank you, James. Thanks, Chair Nan.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Kassar.
Thank you, Chair Nan. And through you, just a couple questions. Thank you, James. You were mentioning about consulting with staff. I'm just curious, has there been consultation with staff up to this point and you just want to have more, or that it hasn't happened?
The ACPD has consulted with staff in June where we raised a number of concerns, but they don't seem to be highlighted in this report. And as I'm not able to speak for the committee, I'm not sure what else I'm able to say at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. Second question is, you mentioned about having lights or acoustic alerts on e-cargo bikes. Do those requirements exist in other jurisdictions, to your knowledge?
No, this is not in local anyways. I know Europe has been experimenting with a number of different devices, including things like infrasound, which would be useful for people with vision loss and hearing loss, but they don't seem to be very successful. In Ontario, I don't believe anybody is using acoustic alerting devices, but we have a high disabled population or people with disability population and seniors. So it'd be a good idea to allow everybody a chance to know what's coming before it gets there.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And there's no further speakers. Thank you again for coming to delegate today. Next up, we have Mark A. McNeil from Accessibility Hamilton Alliance. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
I can hear you loud and clear, so please proceed. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. AHA would like to thank Council, the Chair, and staff for permitting AHA to delegate to the Public Works Committee on this issue. In brief, staff recommends the report be passed and bylaws be passed effective immediately to allow cargo e-bikes to operate in the city. AHA recommends that Council return the report to city staff to cite and address our concerns in a more robust manner. Preamble, the report deals with an emerging mode of transportation referred to as cargo e-bikes. Cargo e-bikes are a type of electric-powered bike with a platform or box to carry larger items like packages and boxes for deliveries. But wait, we were actually surprised to read that cargo e-bikes would also be recommended under the pilot as an option that can help local families and households meet their daily needs without having to rely on a car, such as taking kids to school and grocery shopping. The report cites e-cargo bikes as a means of supporting families, including transport of children, but in all circumstances, there is no ability to seat belt a child or need to use a special chair for transport or travel. When has this become part of the cargo e-bike discussion or promotion? To be clear, we agree commercial cargo e-bikes can be beneficial as they support the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and provide an opportunity to reduce traffic and parking pressures on local roads. Challenges occur with cargo e-bikes include pedestrian safety, user safety, liability, licensing, potential parking, issue conflicts, and include encroaching on sidewalks, trails, bike lanes, and in public parks. Financial analysis is reported as not applicable. Staffing analysis suggests that there are no staffing implications associated with this report. Does HPS and Licensing and Bylaw Services Division have current budget capacity to handle enforcement? Legal analysis is also reported as not applicable. There are no legal implications for the city. Under relevant consultation, page 4, the consultation with city staff is extremely brief. The results of the Engage Hamilton survey, which is a user proactive online, not a proactive survey approach, reported a statistically insignificant proportion of the population, or about 0.0011% of the population. That's using 503 data responses of the greater Hamilton area population of 478,000 over the age of 15 in data from Census Canada 2021. It suggests, the report, that over 90% of the respondents are in support. Respondents supports a permissive approach with the majority of agreement of allowing cargo e-bikes to operate and park in the same way as a standard bicycle. The analysis provides no details at all about the questions asked or how these questions may have been geared towards a positive result in support of a permissive approach. Councillors, cargo e-bikes have a motor. They can travel up to 32 kilometers an hour. They have mass, and an impact will have force. The consultation with the relevant advisory committees, there is no reference as to what was discussed with committees. The report cites the support of the Seniors Committee, but again, no explanation for their support, rationale, nor concerns. The report cites concerns of ACPD, but provides no detail of why these concerns cause ACPD to be opposed to have a permissive trial. Other observations. Proportions of the report cite safety concerns, but provide zero information pertaining to the risks and safety concerns beyond a simple passing mention. It provides no information about alert systems built into all vehicles to alert pedestrians or persons with disabilities. It provides no details about safety stopping features when vehicles are traveling at a high rate of speed with a heavy load and their ability to stop with only a second's notice. It cites permission to travel on public thoroughfares, including paths and trails, but provides no detail about bylaw enforcement in these remote locations, other than it will cost nothing for bylaw enforcement. It provides no details to register these vehicles, provide proof of insurance or liability in case of accident. Only self-reporting is cited. If a pedestrian is injured, what is their recourse? It spends most of the time citing other cities have adopted these vehicles, but have provided zero detail on issues such as accidents, injuries, deaths, and all associated costs with these events. This 12-page report is summed up as the federal and provincial governments permit it. Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver did it. London is considering it, so we should too, permissively. Why the big rush? For the chair, councillors, we respectfully request that you send this report back to staff and to please consider safety concerns held by seniors and persons with disabilities, as well as children under 16 years of age in your deliberations. Again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for your delegation, Mark. Speakers list is activated. No questions at this time. Thank you again. Oh, my apologies. Councillor McMeekin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mark, thanks for your...
Can I just pause you for a second? You're-
How's that? Is it better? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Again, thank you, Madam Chair, for this, and Mark, for your presentation. As you spoke, I was sitting listening, thinking, well, I won't say anything on this because it's kind of a done deal, but it's more than that. I think you raised a lot of concerns. I've chatted with a number of people out in Ward 15 who raise a couple of the kinds of issues that were raised in Paris, France, before Paris banned e-bikes recently, namely the number of times that e-bikes end up on sidewalks. You mentioned wanting to see things coming. Well, you know, particularly seniors are concerned about that, and there have been some jurisdictions where that's been a real issue. And the other is one who used to be a biker until a car drove me off the road, and my friend hit his head on a cement telephone pole, and fortunately recovered, but I've never ridden a bike since. He didn't have a very good helmet on, and I think if kids are going to be, you know, even 16-year-olds who are not always as careful as some parents would like to see them be, are going to be riding e-bikes, e-scooters. You know, there has to be a lot of concentrated conversation around safety, having to wear helmets, and I don't know what the fine is if somebody gets caught riding one of these on a sidewalk and chasing somebody onto the road, but you know, I'd like to see that all that stuff laid out. So I appreciate the very legitimate concerns that you've raised, and it obviously points to the need to do more research. And as you suggest, why the rush? Slow it down a bit and get the answers. And I think those arguing in favor of moving forward with a small group to study it, I'm hopeful that that's the rationale, that they want to get more information and make sure it's done right. That's all I want to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you. No questions, no further questions of the delegation? Thank you, Mark, for coming in this afternoon to share your delegation. That exhausts our delegations list. May I please get a mover and seconder to receive delegation 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3? Moved by Councillor McMeekin, seconded by Councillor Beattie. Thank you. Any discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none, please vote electronically or indicate otherwise. And that carries. Thank you. We're moving on to consent items. First up is 9.1. Whoa, 1 second. Is that right? Okay, moving on to consent item 9.1, Clean and Green Hamilton Strategy 2022 Year-End Update PW Report 23026. Could I get a mover and seconder to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Francis, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Thank you. Any discussion on the Clean and Green strategy? We have staff ready to answer any of your questions as it is an annual strategy report. Okay, seeing none, we're receiving it. Thank you. That carries, thank you. On to 9.2, intersection control list, PW 23001A for wards 3 and 13. May I please get a mover and seconder to receive the item and put it on the table? Moved by Councillor A. Wilson, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Thank you both. Discussion on the item. First up is Councillor A. Wilson.
Thank you. Just going to move a motion actually to defer the Ward 13 intersection. So this will just be about Ward 3, having some ongoing conversations with Public Works teams about broader safety reviews. And let's just not do two things beside each other. Let's work in unison around how to do that improvement. So that's all, is just to moving a motion to just delay this to a future Public Works meeting in line with other traffic safety improvements we're working on in the area.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McMeekin's mentioning that he'll second the deferral motion for you. No further questions? Oh, next up is Councillor Kassar.
Thank you, Chair Nan. I just wanted to ask if Director Field could just explain the impetus behind, or to add stop signs to what is currently a very quiet neighborhood that hasn't had stop signs up to this point. If I could please, through you, Chair.
Through the chair to the councillor, Mike Field, Acting Director of Transportation. The Highway Traffic Act requires drivers approaching an uncontrolled intersection, that's an intersection without stop signs, yield signs, or traffic signals, to yield to the right-of-way of any vehicle within the intersection that has entered it from an intersecting roadway. Those are the rules within the Highway Traffic Act. When two vehicles enter an intersection, at the same time or almost at the same time, it's always a requirement to yield to the right-of-way to the vehicle on your right. Uncontrolled intersections are allowed by the Highway Traffic Act. Using stop signs to replace uncontrolled intersections is considered best practice by the Ontario Traffic Manual and the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Canada. The purpose of a stop sign is clearly to assign right-of-way of vehicles between vehicles approaching an intersection. It's not meant to control speeds or anything like that. The use of stop signs clearly assigns right-of-way between vehicles approaching intersection and reduces the opportunity for a conflict between vehicles. This supports the principles of Vision Zero, which recognizes that people make mistakes and that redundancy in the system is important. So this provides that clarity as far as who's supposed to go first at an intersection. From a driver's behavior perspective, consistency within the traffic network with devices is really important, so that drivers, no matter where you drive in the city, you always have the same experience. Over the past number of years, my team has been working on reducing those inconsistencies across our network, and this is one of the examples of removing uncontrolled intersections in the city. So no matter where you drive in the city, you don't come across an uncontrolled intersection, and the right-of-way is clearly defined by those devices.
Councillor?
Yeah, thank you for that. And the reason I wanted to ask about this is not because I don't support safety, quite the opposite. We need to make our streets safer, and certainly supporting Vision Zero is one of our top priorities. I bring it up because I know there's many examples where we have, whether it's speed limits or stop signs throughout Hamilton that are ineffective, and I've had constituents tell me with stop signs in particular that cars do not stop. And the intersections on our roads in general are engineered and designed in such a way that they encourage reckless driving, speeding, disobeying a stop sign. So it's not a comment at all about what staff are doing there, as Director Field indicated, following recommendations and in fact requirements. I bring the point up because we need to be changing, I strongly believe, the way that we think about our roads and how we improve safety. The engineering, I've looked at many roads, or we ask for someone driving 30 kilometers an hour or put in stop signs, and the road is engineered like a drag strip. I know that we were speaking in, I think it was council last week, about drag racing on Mount Albion Road, and I know that's not to do with stop signs, but it's just general in the principle and how we approach safety on our roads. Not saying anything disparaging about staff at all, not at all. I think it's just, as a council, we need to be thinking differently on what we ask staff to help us with to improve road safety. So that's the spirit of my question, and why I wanted to understand that. I think this quiet neighborhood is traffic calmed. There are quiet streets, and I wouldn't expect that a stop sign is going to do much. But again, not specifically a comment about the specific installation. So thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Crutch.
First, I'll just say apologies. I meant to ask a question about the previous report and forgot to, so I'll come back after about that. On this report, though, yeah, I echo what Councillor Cassar is saying here. Like, just give you the example of the North End in Ward 2, and then I'll ask my question. People love to slide a stop sign like no one's business in the North End in Ward 2, especially along some of the more southern parts of the North End, which don't have the same traffic calming features of the street design that the other parts of the North End have. And frankly, it's pretty unsafe there. And stop signs create a tension whereby people stop and then speed up in between stop signs. So and there's been countless studies in North America at this point, up in 2023, to say stop signs aren't very effective. Is part of the reason why we're doing this a cost reason? I just want to know that straight up. We can re-engineer the streets to make them safer. We know that. Our staff know exactly what I'm talking about, right? There are ways to physically design our streets to make it very, very difficult to speed. A stop sign is a suggestion. So are we not implementing these construction type solutions because frankly, construction costs a lot and there's a timeline where we can put stop signs in the interim, and that's maybe an interim solution, and then eventually we're going to move to a construction phase. Could you talk about that a bit, Director Field?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Through the chair to the councillor, both Councillor Crutch and Councillor Cassar are making good points, which is in alignment with the recently approved Complete Streets guideline that talks about a safe systems approach where on the example that Councillor Cassar used, that you have a straight road, essentially, doesn't matter what speed limit you set on it, people are going to drive what they believe is the right speed, as opposed to if you reconstruct the street to actually inhibit someone from driving quickly. Same thing for intersections. So the built environment is really important. I think there is a cost factor to it to go through the entire city and rebuild it so that we meet the needs or the objectives of the Complete Streets guideline. Would be a huge cost and a challenge for us. But it's really important when we do have those opportunities to reconstruct streets that we're embedding those Complete Streets guidelines and strategies right into those designs so that we disable unsafe or aggressive driving behaviors from drivers through the built environment. In this case, adding the stop sign is about going through and making sure we have consistency and consistent expectations of drivers through the entire community so that they know what they're coming up against when they're entering an intersection. Could be confusing for someone who's not used to that neighborhood to drive within that neighborhood and not come across a yield sign or stop sign. As opposed to the neighbors who live on that street. So I think that there's a cost piece to it for sure, and a barrier for us to go through and redesign streets across the entire city.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks. And so in your experience, I want to just drill down to this confusion aspect a bit more. And I think about the most prominent example in Ward 2 is probably Rebecca Street. Rebecca and Ferguson intersect near the Central Police Station. There are stop signs one way, but not the other way. And I pass by there regularly, and people are often confused. What that confusion, from my anecdotal observation, entails is reduced speed, checking around a lot, and ensuring they proceed with caution. I understand also, of course, that confusion could lead to misapplication of the driving instrument, I mean the car, and some harms. But I'm curious to know which side of the scale you feel the evidence points to in terms of how that confusion manifests itself in driving behavior.
Director.
Through the chair to the councillor, I'm just trying to reframe your question in my mind. Stop signs in the city, unfortunately, in the past, we have been using stop signs to control speed. We have misapplied stop signs, and we have eroded, not just us, but other municipalities, have eroded the whole purpose of stop signs. And then you get that proliferation of people who are running stop signs and that sort of thing just based on their use. So when we install new stop signs today, we're very careful in making sure that there's some empirical justification for it that meets best practices, or there's some other factors like consistency and that sort of thing to exactly remove the opportunity to the point that you're making, Councillor Crutch, about people not abiding by that treatment and actually perhaps creating more unsafe conditions because of it. So it is a challenge since we have so many stop signs in the city that perhaps were installed in a day and time which they were used for purposes that they weren't really meant for or shouldn't have been used for. But they're there now, and we have to manage them in some way, shape, or form, including reviewing them and reviewing collision patterns, that sort of thing, from our annual collision reports to see where there's occasions where, whether it's a signal or a stop sign or any treatment, is it effective? Is it causing more collisions or solving collisions? And then going in and proactively correcting those things, or not proactively, but responding to those things that we're seeing and correcting them. Not too sure if that answers your question. If it didn't, please let me know.
Councillor?
Answer my question and more, and I really appreciate the answer. Thank you very much. What you're telling me, if I understand correctly, is two things. One, where we see we can afford to put a construction application in, perhaps as a first measure, we'll be able to do that. We may have to build in non-construction measures to allow some intersection control, and that eventually lead to some more construction measures whereby we change the street design. And part of the reason why we're having to apply a stop sign type of methodology to some of this is because our past behavior has made a stop sign methodology the default or de facto, and so sometimes we're still in that space. But our goal is we're moving toward a space where we can start to use complete street guidelines to construct things in an effective and safe way. And that's where we're headed. So stay tuned. Is that essentially it?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct. And I would say part of the evolution of using traffic control devices for what they are or what we want them to. Whenever we have a request from the public or from whomever, or whenever we're looking at the situation, we're trying to look at what we're trying to solve and then apply the best method to resolve that issue. And speed cushions, I like to use the term speed cushions are the new stop sign in the city of Hamilton, because they are filling the purpose of what stop signs used to fulfill, and they do it in an excellent and awesome way. That is the best method to control speeding on a residential street. A stop sign is not the way to do that. So then you see that we have reduced the number of stop signs that we're using in residential neighborhoods, and we've increased the use of speed cushions, because that is the appropriate treatment for the condition and the issue that we're trying to prevent or solve.
Thank you for your questions. That's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor. If I could turn the chair over, I don't have a vice chair present today, so who wants to act as a chair right now? Over to you, Councillor Cassar. Thank you. Just one quick question and point, since the map of these two stop signs in Ward 3 are up for discussion, and I appreciate the discussion around the table. So just if I could, for clarity, Central Avenue is a small street, very much like Sherbrooke, which is further down. Between Rothesay and Kensington, Sherbrooke already has the stop sign. This is the only portion of the Delta West area. Sorry, Crown Point West. Wait a minute, where am I? Nope, Delta West area that doesn't have the stop signs, correct?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct, and that speaks to the consistency of application for sure. That's the only street that we've found that is missing those stop signs.
Thank you. And through you, Councillor Kassar, just a reminder to Ward 3 residents that we were one of the fortunate wards that were able to participate in the Complete Streets review with the technical and comprehensive review of all neighborhood streets across the ward, and there are a number, hundreds, in fact, recommendations coming out of that report, which are fundamentally that redesign overlay that both Councillor Kassar and Councillor Kretsch spoke of today during committee, and a reminder to residents that that work is ongoing. The Speed Cushions Phase 2 installation is happening this spring, and we'll continue making progress in terms of the built environment design and continuing around this consistency so that we have predictability in our neighborhoods and most importantly, safety. So thank you both. I'll take back the chair and we are moving to receive. No, we are moving to defer the Ward 13 portion of the control list. First, moved by Councillor A. Wilson, seconded by Councillor McMeekin. That carries, thank you. And then over to the remainder of the report to be received, please. That carries, and we're moving on to 9.3, which is the ice cream vendor operation at Confederation Beach Park, PW Report 23027, Ward 5. It's an outstanding business list item. Councillor Francis, I'm assuming you're moving this? Oh, my apologies. Hang on, Councillor Francis. Councillor Kretsch did mention that he did have a question for item 9.1, which is the Clean and Green Hamilton Strategy 2022 year-end update. So we'll entertain those questions before getting through the rest of the consent items. Councillor Kretsch?
Thanks, and sorry, my notes were here, but I didn't read them. So in the numbers in Table 3 on page 4, I wanted to focus on those. In the description here, it talks about the enforcement team has made great progress in educating residents to change behaviors and enforcing contravention of the bylaws. So the report is talking about the impacts that this has had and the education that it's had in terms of changing behaviors and enforcing contraventions. But then when I look at the chart in Table 3 on page 4, what I'm seeing are that actually from 2020 to 2022, we had a more than doubling of solid waste management bylaw service issues. We also had consistent numbers of business investigations, but a drop in warnings and orders. So I'm trying to make sense of these numbers in the context of that specific comment. What is accounting for that dramatic increase there and the sort of drop in warnings orders related to the bylaw? If you could unpack that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Over to Director of Environmental Services, Cynthia Graham, please.
Great. Hi, I'm going to take that.
My apologies. Go for it, Joel.
No worries at all. Through the chair, thank you. My name is Joel McCormick. I am Manager of Waste Collections. And to answer the councillor's question, it's a little bit deceiving looking at the chart, but for 2022, it's just a difference in reporting. So it doesn't mean that there was more than double. It's basically consistent throughout the years. It's just reporting has changed in the way that the information is going into our systems.
Thanks. Could you be more specific about that? What you mean by what the change in reporting is?
It would be the way that we are reporting in our Hansen system and the way that we are tracking the data. So for example, there were some files that were not accounted for, not a bad thing at that point, but that were closed for 2022 and that were not previously closed in the previous years, if that makes any sense.
So if I understand it correctly, you're categorizing or qualifying issues in a different manner in this reporting system in 2022, and so that it's reducing, it's just, you have more material.
It's just more information that wasn't captured in 2020 or 2021 because it wasn't into the system as it is now.
I see. So it's like if you had more tags, for instance, and those tags produced obviously more issues because you were starting to look at more issues. I understand. I think it's like the correlation between that we had from our presenter before. When you have more of something, sometimes you find more of something, right? So you have more support and you're able to locate more issues. Doesn't necessarily mean there's an increase in issues. It means there's an increase in the capacity to find them.
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, moving back to item 9.3. Thank you. Councillor Francis, yeah, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Thank you. And moved and seconded. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none, we're ready to receive it. Please vote electronically. And a vote is coming up shortly. E-scribe. In case that takes any longer, anybody opposed to receiving this? No? Awesome. Okay, there you go. It came in. Oh, it's ready to move on. So close. Please vote. That carries. Thank you. Moving on to 9.4, litter collection update, PW 23028, citywide. Outstanding business list item. May I please get a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and seconded by Councillor Spatafora. Councillor Maureen Wilson. Any discussion? Yeah. The speakers list is Councillor Crutch, followed by Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thanks. And through the chair, I've got some questions about this report, a few. On page 2 of the report, it says, and I quote, "Any placement of additional litter cans and receptacles or increase in frequency of collection would require additional resources to be serviced." Could you speak to me a bit more about our service level and where these additional resources come from?
Director.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Acting Director of Environmental Services. So through the chair, Councillor Crutch, I believe you are referring to the item that talks about waste receptacles in parks. So current standard is for park waste receptacles to be collected 3 times a week during the summer season and twice a week during the winter. In particular, the issue that we see with respect to increased litter collection is related to our student staffing, which ramps up in the summer, and are dedicated to performing maintenance activities within parks, including litter collection. In the end of summer, our staff numbers go down significantly, and that is in addition to the fact that there's areas of parks that aren't frequented as often. That's one of the reasons why the litter collection is reduced in parks during the winter season. Did I answer the question you were asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
You did. Thank you very much for explaining a little bit more about the nuances of that. And I asked because there's just garbage everywhere in Ward 2. On to my second point. I noticed in terms of the type, no matter the type of litter collection expenditure between 2020 and 2022, there's a reduction in spending between 2020 and 2022. And if I understand it correctly, I could be wrong, especially looking to 2021 and 2022 as those 2 years, seeing the downward trend. I think we invested more in this over time, but it looks like we're spending less in this over time. And I'm asking because the sense I've gotten is that we don't have the capacity necessarily to do more than we're doing. And the two issues intersecting there for me are, well, when garbage blows around somewhere and collects somewhere, and then our office contacts someone and says, hey, hi, garbage needs help, it's trapped over here on this fence, that seems to be like that would cost us a little bit more in terms of dealing and triaging with these garbage issues than it would if there was a regularization of those hotspot areas as part of the garbage pickup mandate in some meaningful way. But if we're spending less over time, then we're probably not incorporating those things. If what I'm saying is making sense, I hope, I'm trying to identify something here and understand it, but also look for a solution going forward. So if you could acknowledge and understand that, I would appreciate it, or respond to it, pardon me.
So through the chair, I'm just going to reframe the question so I can articulate, make sure that I understand. So the idea is that if we collect less locations, that there's more opportunity for garbage to blow around, or if the reactive activities cost more to collect because we're having to respond on an as-needed basis. Okay, so I'm going to defer this question to Manager Kara Bunn, who's online, who has more details about the specifics of how all of that activity works and the costs associated.
Thank you. Manager?
Through the chair, Manager Kara Bunn, Parks and Cemeteries. There's many factors that would influence how our costs are being allocated. Every year, we may have various things that draw our attention away, such as COVID. So we may have been doing a bit less collection then if we had less staff in. And so you'll see that reflected in our costs. But we also sometimes have to spend more time at certain sites where there's illegal dumping. So the calculation will change a little bit because it then hits other line items. The other thing is a lot of the picking is identified. Those costs are identified when you're going out and you're doing just the pickup within a park. It sometimes gets tied into the cost of the ground maintenance, so the mowing. And in that case, it's dependent on our operators to make sure that they're identifying both, and sometimes it's not always captured. So there's a good chance that those costs are variable because of just that data collection.
Councillor?
Thank you. And through the chair, so if I'm understanding what you're saying at a different level, you're saying there's not always a lot of flexibility in this system in terms of, I may feel it's flexible in certain ways. It's not a very flexible system in terms of the financial model.
Through the chair, yes, I would agree with what you're saying. Because we have a lot of priorities and all of them, we need to catch up on cutting grass. There's other activities, there's benches to be maintained. We can't take staff off of those activities all the time to focus on litter collection. So if we're going to ramp up litter collection, if we have a dry summer and we're not doing as much mowing, of course, then we're doing more litter collection. But it's very contingent on what's happening in the parks, and we have to react to that.
Councillor?
Thank you. My last question is about what the plan is. So for me, there's something happening downtown, right? So we're increasing the density. Sometimes we're increasing the wind corridor effect that happens downtown. I'm noticing that garbage cans around the lower city are more full than they used to be 10 years ago on a regular basis. The style and context of the garbage cans that we have is less than ideal for retaining the garbage inside them, shall I say, and having it not blow out and blow around. This confluence of factors in over-densifying downtown is like a moving target. But the system we have for dealing with this thing isn't very flexible. What's the plan coming forward in terms of 2024 and the 2024 budget process for starting to adapt our litter collection techniques to better manage this overall density and frankly trash a lot of places that wasn't in the past in the downtown core?
Thank you. Over to you, Director.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So I think going forward, Councillor, that we can take a look at where are some problematic areas, if there are, and how we review our service levels. And if that's something that Council would like us to take a look at, then we can evaluate that for a future operating budget request.
Okay, and just a naive question for me, how do I transform that into an action?
It'd be in the form of a motion.
Not today, obviously, I'm just saying in general.
But it sounds like a request to staff, direction to staff to review the service level of waste and litter collection. And Councillor, you would have to specify if you wanted that as it relates to roads or each service responsibility division or department of the city.
Okay, and I see
just
some
on the
eyes from
fly.
Councillor Maureen
Yeah.
Wilson, so maybe we're going to give each other this eyes and we're going to do this.
An
together. Okay.
opportunity to come back with a motion, either
Yeah, not
today
now.
or another time.
I'll follow up with you folks about that and about getting something to come forward, because I do
Much
think that
appreciated.
this has revealed to me that I see some of the areas here where we could probably improve this. Thanks so much, and thanks for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by just a comment, and then I would like for public consumption, if I could, Director Graham, to walk through what the report is telling us, because we didn't get that overview. But my first is my statement. I think that litter is too kind of a word. I almost think it's such a benign word. We need to change our nomenclature. It's pollution. Much of it is toxic, whether it's cigarette butts or otherwise. It does damage to our waterways, and it inflicts a lot of costs, which, if I'm reading this report right, we don't actually account for. We account for some pickup on the front end, but we don't actually account for the costs at the back end. So if I could, through you, Chair, I had asked in January if we could have an account of how much the corporation expends on, and I use this word, litter collection across the city outside of our regularly scheduled efforts. So if I could ask through you to Director Graham to share with us and the public who are watching, what does this report tell us through the chair?
Thank you. To you, Director.
Through the chair. So further to the direction that we received on January 20th, which was to report back on the amount expended on litter collection across the city outside of regularly scheduled efforts by Waste Management, including reporting on what factors inform the planning and scheduling of public litter collection efforts in public spaces. And so this report looks at all of the activities that are undertaken by the various divisions in Public Works that are outside of the waste collections section, which would be the trucks that go and pick up the garbage at the end of your driveway, all of the activities outside of that. So it looked at both reactive and proactive litter collection activities, including emptying of waste receptacles in parks, proactive litter collection along roadways, scheduled activities with respect to stream cleanups, but then also looked at how much is expended to illegal dumping activities, encampment cleanups, additional activities to that. So the Table 1 in report PW 23028 summarizes that the annual litter collection program expenditure in 2020 was $2,191,811. In 2021, $2,665,812. And in 2022, $2,350,779. And the report goes into a bit more detail with respect to additional activities that are performed by volunteers that help us pick up litter across the city. Has also been summarized in previous reports to committee with respect to the Team Up to Cleanup program and the Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee. Those litter remediation programs mobilized in 2022 over 4,000 volunteers and picked up 8,760 bags of garbage and recycling, which is an incredible contribution to litter collection across the city.
Councillor.
Thank you. Through the chair, I really appreciate that the effort was made to assign a value to the volunteers, which takes us up to, we're expending about $2.7 million, Chair, on picking up litter in this city. That's a phenomenal amount of money, but a necessary expense, regrettably, that has to be exercised. If I could ask then, through the chair, If you could, Director Graham, and it's something that I tried to work my way through often, is who does what. If you could just, there's litter, too much litter along our roadways. Yes, in cemeteries, yes, in public spaces. Could you just set out that who does what for me, please, through the chair?
Yep, through the chair. So any litter collection within a space that is, quote, owned by our Parks and Cemetery staff would be collected by Parks and Cemetery staff. So that would be neighborhood parks, community parks, cemeteries, properties, open spaces. Those would be the purview of our Parks and Cemeteries team led by Kara Bunn. The proactive roadway cleanups, that would be overseen by the Transportation Division led by Mike Field and his team. And then any sort of cleanups related to streams and that proactive maintenance, that would be led by the Hamilton Water Division, led by Nick Winters.
Thank you. If I could ask, it kind of along the similar vein that Councillor Crutch was probing, it says on page 3, scheduled litter pickup is completed by staff assigned to areas more prone to litter. Could you inform me on what are those factors that are causing some places to be more prone to litter than others?
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councillor, Acting Director of Transportation, Mike Field. We have both in roadway maintenance within the right-of-way. We've identified areas of the city that traditionally collect more garbage or more litter is prone to collect to. I'm just trying to think of some examples. I think, like fencing or that sort of thing where litter is caught by the wind and stopped are maybe examples where there's some form that exists within the right-of-way that collects litter more actively. So we flag those within our system, within our operations, that we need to go out there and do more litter collection than what's normal. Off the top of my head, I don't have any real examples that I can lean on at this moment, but we through our patrols and through just our experience of operations, we know kind of hot spots of where litter kind of hangs out, and then we go there more often than we would for other parts of the city where that doesn't occur.
Thank you, Councillor.
So if I could maybe pose the same question, but in a hypothetical way. If we have a neighborhood that is intentionally designed for residential purposes only, and it's all single family, and then we compare that neighborhood to one that has a mix of single family, high density, commercial, even light industrial, do those two neighborhoods enjoy the same level of service for pickup?
Thank you, Director.
Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councillor. I would say generally, yes, litter is identified through our road patrol program. So as we drive through the city, if we find an area where litter has occurred, then we will react to it and pick up litter there. So it doesn't matter what street you live on within the city, that patrol program will visit your street, and if it finds litter, it will flag it as something that we need to do. As far as the built environment and how it may collect garbage, I have a harder time kind of answering your question as it relates to those sorts of conditions.
Councillor?
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Crutch's observation, it's just my observation that denser, more urban neighborhoods, neighborhoods with a high population of a mix of rental, for example, whether it be seasonal students or otherwise, these neighborhoods may require a different level of service, and their parks may be used more frequently because they don't have a backyard, or they don't go to a cottage in the summer, so they're there more frequently. And I think that's what I'm interested in getting at is how our form and how our conditions and how our lived realities are informing our levels of service. So that's where I think Councillor Crutch and I will be going. I don't want to speak for him though, but I know we've had conversations. If I could ask another question on blue boxes, which have been around for a long time. And my understanding of way back when is they were almost introduced, Chair, as an experiment. And they were open. And it is, I try and wait until the early morning to put mine out because I think it's adding a cost to this municipality. So the question I'm often asked is, through the Chair, why don't we have lids on blue boxes? Through the Chair.
So appreciating all of these questions. Over to you, Director.
Thanks. Through the chair, Angela Story, the Director of Waste Management. So we allow lids, we just don't buy and provide lids. We did do a budget exercise maybe a handful of years ago, and I can get that information for you, Councillor Wilson, on that. It is also interesting and human nature in my brain. We used to have smaller blue boxes. So as you drive through the city, you might see some that are around knee-high height, a little bit lower, and then you'll see the ones that are a little bit taller. So once upon a time, we implemented the taller blue bins, and that was to help stop escaped recyclables. And the thought at the time was to give a bigger blue box, but to not fill it to the brim. Of course, when we have our blue boxes, we fill them to the brim anyways. So it just expanded the height of the amount of recyclables that you could put in that taller blue box.
Councillor?
That's really interesting, Chair, because I had a blue box with a lid on it that didn't get picked up, but I'll leave that for a different discussion. The final question I have is the reference to Hamilton Water practices, and I'll just read it aloud for my colleagues. Hamilton Water completes biannual water course and shoreline cleanups and litter collection and stormwater facilities and storm sewer outfall. They collect the litter, but the activity does not specify or track the amount or the costs. Through the Chair, why?
Through your chair to the councillor, Nick Winters, Director for the Hamilton Water Division. The only reason is that given our contractual structure, it's difficult to parse out the cost for litter collection, for those assets versus grass cutting, for example, at stormwater management facilities, other creek erosion and maintenance type of activities. So we do the work. But separating out the costs that are specific to collection of trash and debris and litter isn't available at this point in time. It's something that we're working on.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. You have one final question, I think. Has there been consideration in the past of Councillor Danko and I think a few others, when we were first elected in 2018, went on a tour of the facility off Barton, and it was quite an experience for me and made me much more mindful of what I'm bringing into our household and how I'm preparing it for going out. Has there ever been a consideration, or do we do public tours of that facility? Through the Chair, and that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks. Through the chair to Councillor Wilson. We have in the past. You'll recall when you were there just sort of the safety components that are required. So what we would like to do moving forward, if we were to offer them again, we would just kind of like to do things from a distance as opposed to maybe as up close and personal that you had that day. We do have the new Waste Management Subcommittee. We'll be getting together for the first time in May. We're just waiting on the public members for that committee, and we'll definitely be offering the different facility tours to the councillors as part of the Waste Management Subcommittee, and can offer that out to other councillors as well. We have National Public Works Week is coming up towards the end of May, and we have Earth Day. It's this weekend, so not part of this weekend, but we have Waste Reduction Week in the fall. So we kind of look to those celebratory times, and we have conversations in-house about whether we wanted to do some public open houses or tours or things like that. So those are on the list for this year, as we, again, mentioning earlier, kind of coming back and getting people together and doing those kind of things. So we're definitely on for that, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the work that went into doing this. I think it's, for me, been very valuable, and I will use it going forward. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up on the speakers list, we have Councillor Danko, followed by Councillor A. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. This report includes the cost of cleaning up encampments?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. And talking about litter and garbage all over the place, I think can't ignore the impact that encampments are having. The amount of junk that they produce is just unbelievable, along with dangerous items such as needles and drug paraphernalia. The one I'm thinking about in particular in Ward 8 happens to be at the top of the escarpment, and it looks like a garbage waterfall, basically just going over the side constantly and generating quite a bit of complaints from members of the community, and also cost for staff having to go out and constantly clean this up, along with the amount of trash and debris and items that are collected from who knows where, from other garbage disposal days, or some perhaps might be stolen, who knows. But I believe we just approved in the 2023 budget dedicated park staff in order to help assist with cleaning up encampments. So can I just get a reminder of specifically what was approved in the 2023 budget?
Over to you, Dr.
Through the
Graham.
chair, there was a parks supervisor that would be dedicated to encampment response and coordinate those efforts through housing and the other members that get involved in that issue, as well an increase to the parks operations budget in order to assist with the costs associated with the encampment cleanups. And that was $200,000 if I recall correctly.
Councillor Danko.
Thank you. And just a follow-up, I guess. On some of the encampments, through our office, we've asked if it would be possible just to put a bin there, because, I mean, if any of us were living rough, you know, we would be generating our own trash as well. If that is something that could be considered moving forward in terms of just the approach to encampments, because we end up having to go clean up after the fact anyway.
Director?
Through the chair, regular garbage pickup, if provided in garbage bags and put by the curb in a location that park staff can pick it up, can be facilitated, and has been coordinated in the past and will continue to be so in the future. So certainly that is a good strategy that we have worked out with encampment residents in order to help manage the debris and garbage associated with living rough.
Excellent. Thank you. That's good to know.
Thank you. Over to Councillor A. Wilson, please.
Thank you. Just one question, but I'll just share a quick anecdote following the Councillor Danko's comments. Anecdotally, I found the opposite to be true. When folks are living in Campton Ward 13 and more natural areas, trails, oftentimes a bag is appearing there and it's actually becoming a waste receptacle or like a site, and the trail is getting cleaned up from those practices. And so that's been rather commonplace at multiple sites in Ward 13. I know we're just sharing ward-specific anecdotes here, but just to say, yeah, definitely interested and really, really value the numbers in this report speaking to the value of community cleanups as well. I know there's a couple of Ward 13 residents that are beyond diligent, but are community champions in terms of pursuing weekly creek cleanups and other types of initiatives. My one just quick question is, Councillor Crutch and Councillor Maureen Wilson spent a lot of time on the where element and really appreciated the proactivity there. We know all levels of government are saying that they would like to move towards a polluter pays or a producer pays model when it comes to waste. Obviously, as a municipality, we have limited tools that we can do. One of them is waste audits to inform any advocacy to higher levels of government, or to at least get a better understanding of who are the most problematic actors or the sources of litter before it's, ending up on our streets in those areas where it blows? Where is it starting from? And are there types of interventions that we could then make to stop it from getting there? When we do some of these cleanups, is there any forms of waste audit? And if there isn't any forms of waste audit, do staff have any anecdotal or thoughts as to maybe where some of those bigger producers are of litter that we're encountering in our communities?
Thank you.
Through the chair, I'm going to start, and then I'll ask Cara Bunn to pop in with any additional information she might have. I think what we see throughout the city is where there are bins overflowing, that does tend to encourage additional illegal dumping. So we do see that sometimes in our parks, that, you know, if there was a festival or something, that there may be additional household garbage in those areas. Additionally, natural spaces tend to be attracting illegal dumping. Some place where people can offload mattresses and household items in a location where they wouldn't necessarily be seen. That can be locations that we do see, you know, illegal dumping that requires cleanup. When we have our bylaw staff go out, they will open the bags and see if they can find identification and can follow up with those residents in order to enforce, you know, dumping bylaws and you know, discourage that kind of behavior. So in some cases we are able to do that and follow through with that. But sometimes it is difficult to get that information from the litter that we find. And I'll just put it over to Cara in case there's additional information she wants to add.
Through the chair, that's correct. We often do rely on bylaw to go through and open bags up and see if there's any identifiers in any of the garbage that we've found. The other thing that we rely on heavily is community members and their eyes. They often call us and they know who's done the dumping. If it's a contractor, they've often seen it and they'll report to us what the license plate is. And so there's various ways that we can get that information. And where we create, where we've seen, hotspots, we create heat maps so that we know where we're getting a lot of illegal dumping. And then our bylaw teams can keep an eye on those sites to see if they can catch who's doing it.
Councillor?
Thank you. That was a really helpful information. To kind of be a little bit more specific in the question, although I think I was getting there, with extended producer responsibility and other types of things on the horizon, are we specifically, when we're opening those bags, not looking for identifying information to say Alex threw out the garbage, but instead to say, it's all Tim Hortons and McDonald's and Starbucks, and therefore we're going to follow up because that Tim Hortons, McDonald's, and Starbucks don't have any garbage cans on site. And so when folks are getting their disposable, single-use, whatever, there's no place to dispose of it, and so it's ending up in municipal facilities, and there might be a private solution, not at cost to the city. Obviously, again, it's a changing legislative framework. We only have the powers we have. Other levels of government will lead. But with EPR on the horizon, are we doing any waste auditing in terms of who the producers are?
Thank you. Over to you.
Through the chair, I don't believe that we are necessarily looking at the illegal dumping and litter from that lens, but if there's any additional information Angela wants to provide about the producer responsibility.
Thanks. Through the chair, Councillor Wilson, I'm thinking of it not from the perspective of the volunteer cleanups. So we don't do audits on that program. We do, however, do audits on curbside waste and the materials recycling facility, floor audits, truck audits, landfill audits. We do audits all the time. So from the perspective of just household waste set out for waste collection, we can certainly include that producer type information as a category. Again, some of that material or that would be deemed garbage, so it might be in the right place, or it might be deemed recyclable, so it could be in the right place, as opposed to it being found along the link or it being found, you know, on the rail trail, things like that.
Councillor?
Thank you. And so that answers it. So we don't is the answer for litter. But we do, and we could in other places, and that's a really helpful. Thank you. If community members were to report that, or if they were to do their own audits as part of these collection services, and that's something volunteer groups wanted to take on, could the city act as a data resource and just hold on to that email? Maybe put it in it if we get it, as opposed to being the collector. If volunteers want to take that step, can we support them in doing so?
Through the chair, any data is great data, and we're happy to receive any information that community members would be willing to provide to us.
Thanks. Those are all my questions through the chair. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. No further speakers on the list. It's been moved and seconded for receipt. Please vote. And that carries. Thank you. On to same theme, but committee minutes. Keep Hamilton Clean and Green, March 21st, 2023 and April 5th, 2023. Please have a mover and seconder to receive these minutes. Moved by Councillor Spatafora, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Thank you both. Any discussion on the minutes of this committee? Seeing none, please vote to receive. That carries. Thank you. On to discussion items. 11.1 is the standardization of vehicle dash cam equipment, PW Report 16019A citywide. May I please get a mover and second to approve this report? Moved by Councillor Danko, second by Councillor Jackson. Thank you both. Any discussion on this consent item? It's just bringing things up to standard and consistency. Councillor Kassar.
Thank you. I didn't have a question about the recommendation. It's just some of the content in the report. Just wanted to understand a little more. Graph 1 on page 4 is just talking about the CVOR points. Where's the acronym? The Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration Points. And it's just pointing to a drastic positive reduction since the dash cams were implemented. My question is there any economic value to that reduction? $33,000 being requested isn't a lot of money. I'm just wondering if there's a business case that is a hard business case that supports it, and is it related to those points? I'm not sure who. Okay.
Director Story, thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Kassar. It's kind of a Fleet question because Fleet actually administers the CVOR program, but as it relates to waste, you've seen here on that table, by utilizing the tools that the dash camera avail us to, we've been able to reduce the amount of preventable accidents and incidents, and that's why we see this as a benefit. Economically, it basically just allows the city to maintain our operating license. There was a period of time 5 or 6 years ago where we were creeping up into a scary zone where we had to have some meetings as a city with the ministry based on the number of points that the city had, that we could have lost our license to operate all commercially assigned vehicles. So by keeping the points low, we stay in great standing and we don't have any issues with the ability to operate.
Okay, so it's, Chair, it's a binary issue then, it's not gradient. Okay, thank you, that's good.
Thank you. And so it's been moved and seconded. No further speakers on the list. Please vote to approve the report. That carries. Thank you. On to 11.2, regulation of cargo e-bikes, PED Report 23080, PW Report 23020. Could I get a mover and seconder to put it on the floor? Councillor Danko, thank you. Second by Councillor Wilson, thank you. That was Maureen Wilson. Are there any questions or discussion from committee respecting this report? Okay, I see Councillor Jackson's hand is up, and others, please know that the speakers list is activated. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thanks, Chair Nan. I am listening to the delegates, Mr. Kemp and Mr. McNeil from ACPD and the AHA Alliance for the Disabled. I just wonder if staff, I see it's a joint report here from Director Hollingworth and from Acting Director Field. If you jointly or whoever wants to take my question, any comments in terms of Chair Nan, the messaging I heard was that there's still some downsides before they want committee and council to move ahead on the cargo e-bikes in terms of consultation, and if staff have explored all the potential downsides first. Through you, Chair Nan, please.
Through the chair, Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. Just a little bit of background, and then we'll answer that question. But the Ministry of Transportation has provided regulation for e-cargo bikes, which allow a municipality to call it opt-in. So right now they're unregulated. And one of the reasons why we've brought this report forward is that the bicycles do exist now, and so this provides some clarity on the rules and the regulations and some predictability and the ability to enforce if required. But that said, it's not super time sensitive, so we want to get this right. The devices themselves are described in the provincial legislation, and to be clear, they're for cargo, so small packages. They have a cart on the front or a cart on the back. They can be 2 or 3 wheels. We do not expect there to be thousands of these vehicles. We don't expect the uptake to be large, but we do see them as some people taking advantage of the opportunity to deliver some courier packages in maybe areas where it's congested, maybe areas where there's less parking and loading space, and where it's convenient for them. So that's just a little bit of a background. I won't go into the benefits which are in the report, but we are bringing this forward because our urban areas are densifying. We've got climate objectives, and these are less polluting vehicles. We've got safety objectives. We've got complaints about courier vehicles blocking lanes and causing traffic congestion. So there are some benefits. But to answer the question, do we see concerns? Not many. These are relatively new type of vehicles, so there's not a lot of experience. But as noted, Toronto opted in, Ottawa opted in. Given the number that we expect are on the street, we don't imagine they'll be taking up sidewalk space, blocking things. So probably less than some of the impacts caused by heavier vehicles, heavier polluting vehicles as they exist today.
Okay,
but again, we want to get it right.
Yep, no, I appreciate that, Director Hollingworth. Thank you for the feedback you've given me, Chair Nan. On page 2, and so forgive my ignorance, Chair Nan, and this is now where often my retro label precedes me. Okay. So I'm trying to picture if I've ever even seen even one of the commercial cargo e-bikes. They're motorized. Do they literally have like a basket on the front, a basket on the back? I'm trying to picture where a child would fit on one of these cargo e-bikes, because it says maybe someone will want to take their kids to school on the cargo e-bike. So forgive me if I've caused some giggling around the chamber, Chair Nan, but maybe Director Hollingworth or Acting Director Field can paint a picture for me and help me understand better, please.
Only if you don't apologize for making others giggle again.
Thank you.
Always welcome.
I'll ask Peter Topolovic, who's done a lot of research on this topic, to answer that question.
Manager Topolovic, please.
Peter Topolovic, Program Manager, Sustainable Mobility, to the Chair. So these bikes, they're somewhat popular amongst families now who cycle regularly and have less car ownership. And if you can imagine, usually in the case of if you're carrying extra passengers, it's usually smaller children. And the bikes are actually created with seats inside the front cargo hold. The seats must be included as part of the cargo hold, and they have a spot for smaller children. So this is already on the road, and there are these devices in Hamilton currently. They were usually not powered by electric assist. They now also have electric assist option. That means you must be pedaling the device, and the motor will kick in to provide you with additional acceleration.
Councillor?
Okay, so a child can fit on this cargo e-bike. You pedal first, and then the motor kicks in. I think the delegates set up to 30K potentially, so obviously this is road oriented, correct? Is it road oriented? Is it dedicated cycling lane oriented? Confirm it's not sidewalk oriented. Through you, Chair Nan, please, to Manager Topolovic.
Through the chair, that's correct. These are meant to be bicycled in bicycle lanes on bicycle infrastructure. And like you would do a regular bicycle in any of those situations, and multi-use pass adjacent to the roadway.
Last question, Chair Nan. On page 3, no staffing implications, but you want Hamilton Police in conjunction with licensing and bylaw to enforce. And I can just picture now with Hamilton Police, don't start the moans and groans, please, Chair Nan and some colleagues of mine, but I'm just picturing with domestics, armed robberies, gangs and guns, narcotics, things like that. So we're going to ask the police to enforce this under what, the HTA, the Highway Traffic Act. Help explain that, please, Manager, through you, Chair Nan.
Okay, Manager?
Through the chair, these devices are already on the road here and in other cities, and they are enforced just like other bicycles. They're less than the width of a bike lane, so they would just again, we haven't heard of many issues of enforcement so far, and we would expect them to not to be that much issues in the future.
So to conclude, Chair Nan, thank you for your indulgence. They're already on the road. So this report then is about the non-commercial component. Is that my last correct interpretation through you, Chair Nan, to the manager, please? Because the manager keeps saying they're already on the road, Councillor. It's like assuring me, relax, Councillor, it's my words, that, you know, they're already there and this is just kind of maybe adding a bit more to it. Can you just clarify, Peter, that for me, please?
Through the chair, with respect to the question around cargo bikes holding children, et cetera, that yes, the other component of this report is the commercial side, where a very similar vehicle, which with a cargo hold that wouldn't hold children, obviously, would be able to bring small packages. Those are on the road in Ontario, but there's not many on the road in Hamilton.
Okay.
There is a company that has delivered coffee using these bikes already for a few years now, and I believe they continue to do so.
Okay, thank you so much, Manager. Thank you, Chair Nan. On behalf of the disabled community, they've just asked for a little more time. If committee, and I respect the will of majority committee, wishes to proceed, it's another modal transportation, a variety of modal transportation we're trying to provide. I'll just be quietly recorded as opposed to it, just in deference to the disabled community. Thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you. On to Councillor Cassar, then Councillor Francis and Danko.
Thank you much, Chair Nan. I really like the idea of cargo bikes, e-cargo bikes, and human-powered cargo bikes, although, of course, these, as the manager just said, require the operator to be pedaling. A lot of benefits, which I won't reiterate, but are covered in the report. A couple of questions, just going on to what Councillor Jackson was asking me about the community and our delegations here today. Could you, maybe to the manager, elaborate on the consultation that did happen and the feedback that was received, and just you know, how we got to the decision to move ahead, given that there still seems to be some concerns. Through you, Chair.
Over to you, Manager.
Through the chair. So at first we started with the public engagement using Engage Hamilton, where we did have the 500 responses and majority of people being in support of pursuing this as a pilot program, opting into the MTO pilot. We also went to both the Senior Advisory Committee and the ACDP, and the feedback, I think, in general was, I think, just like the speakers who spoke today were very accurate with what we heard from especially the ACTB committee. And One of the big ones was, of course, acoustic signaling devices, which I think can be a very good idea with any type of electric vehicle on the road, except that they weren't commercially available. And that was one of the concerns, is to have to require them. There's not something you could buy to add that to your device. So this is one of the concerns that we had in the report, why we didn't add that requirement as an example. And the other ones, I think, are due to a lot more volume. So if we had a lot more of these devices, some of those concerns might be prominent, but we're not expecting that uptake. And in the terms of the pilot, we'll be able to monitor that to make sure that in the future, if we do have some of the issues like the furniture zone of the sidewalk, near the sidewalk being cluttered, we could then address those issues. But we haven't heard that from other jurisdictions having issues with cargo e-bikes being misparked or taking up space that they shouldn't be.
Thank you for that. And Chair, it's a really good point that the manager raises is, I think for anything new, there's always going to be concerns about things that could go wrong or things that might impact the community. They might be accurate, they may not be accurate. And I think with this approach, not expecting a lot of these vehicles in our city, it gives the opportunity to assess how legitimate those concerns are, and to be able to react. So I think that's a wise approach to take, and I would be supportive. I just had one other question, Chair. In the report, the top of page 8, it's talking about practices in other jurisdictions in Toronto and Ottawa have opted into the pilot, and both cities require commercial operators to have insurance and permits to operate. So just wanted for public consumption, is that going to be a requirement in Hamilton for commercial operators to have insurance and permits? Through you, Chair.
Through the chair. So the commercial operators already have commercial liability insurance, and our research showed that that was going to be applicable to their cargo bike operations as well.
Right. Perfect. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I guess, to Director Hollingworth. The report states that this bylaw will allow cargo e-bikes on trails. I just wanted to touch on that. I'm concerned about the serious safety concerns that this could potentially create, particularly in the Hamilton Beach Waterfront Trail. Is this included or excluded from this bylaw? That's my first question. And currently, e-bikes are prohibited on the trail. You can see it, with signs all over the place. Will this remain the case? And could you please elaborate on the trail component of this? Thank you.
Over to you, Director.
Yeah, through the chair, and I'll answer briefly. The answer is they won't be allowed in parks and trails where they're currently restricted, which is most parks and trails. But Cynthia Graham has a more intimate knowledge of all the parks throughout the city and the bylaws.
Terrific.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Acting Director of Environmental Services. So currently the Parks bylaw does not permit motorized vehicles on trails and in parks. The only exception that I know of is a special permit that was granted to a company called Cycling Without Age, and that is operating in 2 distinct locations. That would be separate from this e-cargo bike program.
Councillor Francis.
No, that's everything. Thank you. That helps. I appreciate it.
Next up, we have Councillor Danko, followed by Councillor McMeekin.
Thank you, Chair Nan. Fully support the recommendations before us today for cargo e-bikes. I think we heard pretty clearly that these types of vehicles are already on the road. They're already here. They're going to continue to be here whether we choose to opt in or not. So I think it is the responsible step for this council to set a bylaw, look at it as a pilot, and review if there's any modifications that need to be made. Really appreciate the feedback of some of the concerns listed. I'm just going to focus in on a couple things here because, it kind of strikes me that when these kinds of proposals come forward that we are looking at active transportation in a much different way than we look at vehicular transportation. So our family happens to have a Ford Explorer. It has the worst sight lines of a vehicle that I've ever driven. I think it would be undrivable if it didn't have sensors and cameras and all the bells and whistles, just my opinion. Compared to an active transportation, an e-bike, a cargo e-bike, where the rider is out in the open, has perfect sight lines. The concern that was raised on the stopping distance, I think the requirement for 9 meters or 30 feet, I think the average stopping sight distance for the average vehicle from 30 kilometers an hour is around 40 feet. Up to 75 feet at the speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour. And that's the average. Again, you know, the Ford Explorer, I think, has some of the worst brakes in the industry and is, I would think, certainly longer than that. And the difference there is you're talking about a vehicle that weighs 4,600 pounds instead of, you know, something that's pedal assist run by a battery with a couple kids in a trailer. So the more people that we as a city can promote to use active transportation, to use e-assist because it's easier and faster and more efficient, and get people out of their 4,600 pound SUVs on a regular basis for those day-to-day tasks, that is an absolute win for our city. So fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Councillor McMeekin.
Just one question, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that the city of Paris, France, just recently banned these bikes, and I'm wondering if you could first confirm that, and secondly, perhaps provide a rationale for why they may have done that.
Councillor, I think those were the e-scooters, but over to staff.
Yes, again, Brian Holler, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. Those were different devices. What they banned is the e-scooters. There was, I can't remember, 30,000 or 60,000 or so of them. They held a referendum. About 8% of the people showed up and voted against them. So yes, that did happen, but we're talking about a different type of vehicle here. It's more of a bicycle that delivers goods.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. No further speakers? Oh, yes, we do. Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you. I just want to be recorded as supportive of this. I have gone on in the past before about the need for us to design our city and to accommodate alternative modes of transportation. I do think it is part of our equity commitment. And as someone who does live in the city where there's a lot of delivery trucks who are just interested in doing their job, but I'm interested in accommodating as many alternatives as possible, because the door-to-door delivery is not going to be changing. And I think this is part of a puzzle in getting us to a safer city for more people. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you all for your comments. So it's been moved and seconded. No more on the speakers list. Before committee for approval, please. Oh, wait. Councillor Jackson, you were satisfied there's no further direction based on, because there's further consultation.
Thank you for checking. Appreciate it.
That carries 10-1. Over to 11.3, which is Clean and Green Neighborhood Grant 2023 funding recommendations. Could I get a mover and seconder for these? Thank you, Councillor Alex Wilson, and seconded by Councillor Cassar. Any discussion? Thank you, Councillor A. Wilson.
Just a question on how, and maybe as we're doing committee board selection, how as our needs as a city change, how we're having conversations about biodiversity, a forthcoming action plan, urban canopy, all of these goals and priorities that are getting layered into our changing priorities as a city with after our declaration of a climate emergency, to our existing priorities of litter and kind of keeping environmental stewardship going. Has there been a conversation about the scoping of this grant and other types of clean and green initiatives and how they respond to existing priorities and new priorities? I'm just noticing in some of the evaluation, some projects were supported, some projects weren't. Not trying to go into it. The committee's done their job with the mandate they have, but just wondering for future years, as our priorities changed, have we thought about changing terms of references to explicitly allow for some of these new conversations we're having?
Thank you. Over to staff.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Acting Director of Environmental Services. So this report comes forward from the committee itself. It's not a staff-led report, so I only have peripheral information, but my understanding is that there is a criteria that is applied that is approved through the committee in order to be able to determine whether a particular proposal would meet the criteria to get the grant or not. If I could make a suggestion, if there were additional information needed about how those grants are approved and what the criteria is, that's something that the committee likely could report back on with additional information. And if there were requests or direction from council to that committee about how to increase some of the other priorities that council might have with respect to how those grants are awarded, that would be helpful to that committee to understand.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I acknowledge the urban canopy biodiversity. Some of these are forthcoming, and so it might make more sense to do some of that once they're here. And the committee has reports they can reference. Really appreciate that. Last question from me, and it's okay if the answers we don't know because it's not the committee. When there were questions about an application in the review, were those questions sent to the applicant body for clarification? Or because I noticed in some of the reports it said it was unclear on this, was unclear on that. When there are these issues for clarification, is a clarification request part of the application process, or is that a lesson learned for next time for applicants so they can maybe be clear in future applications?
Through the chair, I'm actually going to ask Rob Wagner, who's on the call. He is the manager of business programs, and his staff oversee the work with the committee and might have more information on that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Rob Wagner, Manager of Business Programs for the Environmental Services Division. Through the chair, I don't have a straight answer for you right now. I'll have to look into it. I'm happy to get back to you.
No worries. Can have these conversations offline as well. Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been moved and seconded. Nobody else is on the speakers list. Please vote to approve. And that carries. On to notices of motion. First up is 13.1, improvements to Gilkson Park, 50 Gemini Drive, Mountain View Park, 115 San Antonio Drive, Scenic Woods Park, 220 Lavender Drive, and Scenic Parkette in 56 West 31st Street in Ward 14. Councillor Spadafora, please introduce your notice of motion.
Yeah, Chair, I don't really have anything to add to that. It's just staying as a notice, and we'll come back at the next committee meeting. But I just want to thank Director Graham, Manager Bunn, and Supervisor Stewart, who met with our team when we were able to go through, our list of parks in Ward 14. And we're looking forward to a few of these motions coming forward over the next couple of years to bring our parks, I think, up to the condition they need to be so that our community can enjoy the parks and get them back up to better condition than what they currently are at. Thank you.
Fair, thank you, and appreciate that it's staying as a notice of motion. Over to, that's it. No further notices. Now, general information, other businesses. 14.1 is amendments to the outstanding business list. They're before you and documented. May I please get a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Crutch and Councillor Spadafora. Any discussion on these items? Seeing nobody on the speakers list, it's before you for approval. And that carries. Any other general information items? Great. On to adjournment. May I please have a mover and seconder for adjourning? Councillor Francis and Spatafora, thank you both. Electronic vote, please. And while you're voting, thank you to all staff in preparation for today's meeting, the reports in the background, all the lead up to them, as well as to the staff in clerks in supporting today's meeting. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.